O tira kia ora tātou, tēnei rā te mihi atu ki a kōtau e mā taki mai nā I tēnei. Ko te manako kei te pai hoki wō kōtau noho haumaru rā I roto I wō kōtau mirumiru I tēnei wā. O tira, hei te tuatahi me tuku karakia kia pai te haere a tātou nei hui. O tira pai ake te haere a rātau mā I runga I te huarahi o tēnei au hurihuri. Ara koe muta ki ngā whakamārama I tēnei wā. He hōnore he kororia ki te atua te rungarawa he mau ngā rongo ki runga I te whenua he whakaaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa āmene. E te atua e tō mātau atua, anei hoki mātau o pononga I raro I wō manaakitanga I tēnei wā e te atua. E te atua, kei te tuku whakamoemiti atua na mātau kia koe. Kia manakitia I e koe ngā pakeke, ngā kaumātua, ngā rangatahi, ngā taiohi o tira tainoa atu ki ngā tamariki mokopuna. Ano e te atua manakitia I e koe ngā tāngata, I roto I ngā whare here, I ngā whare wairangi, I ngā whare haua o tira tainoa atu ki ngā hōhipera. Ano e te atua te tuku whakamoemiti atua na mātau kia koe I tēnei wā. Kia manakitia I e koe, ia mātau, I wā mātau rā haere I roto I tēnei au huruhuri. Ana kia pai hoki tā tātou haere. Ano e te atua manakitia I e koe I ngā whānau e noho ana I raro I te kapua pauri I tēnei wā. O tira tai atu ki ngā whānau me ngā hoa tā wāhi. I roto I tēnei wā te mate uruta I tēnei wā e te atua. Ka whakamoemiti ka oha atua na mātau kia koe mō mātau rā e ko pia nei te waho te raiona. Nā mau e tono mai tau na hera kaha I te rangi hei whakatū wherei tōna mā ngai te kēnana I hō mai nei koe o mātou tīpuna. I nā rā I nā mata kororia ki tō ingoa tapu. Āmene. Kia ora tātou. Kia ora tātou. We'd just like to welcome everybody. Thank you for tuning in to listen to our discussion and also to be part of our continued discussion throughout the series. So first of all, I'd just like to introduce our discussion panel. So we have with us the distinguished Professor Graham Hingangaroa Smith, and also the beautiful Professor Linda Tuhiwai, and of course the renowned Professor Leonie Pihama, who is our chair. So at this stage, I'll pass it on to our chair to introduce the kaupapa of the Kōrero.
Kia ora wetene, tuatahi ka unmute ahau I ahau. Tautoko ngā mihi, kua mihia me te karake e whakatakotohia E koe I tēnei ata no reira tēnā koe. So, kia ora everyone. This is the first of a series of Kaupapa Māori theory and methodology discussions that we thought we would have together. As a part of some mahi we're doing at Ngā Waiata Tui and with Tūtama Wahine Taranaki, which is a Māori community organisation. And fortunately, we've been able to join with Linda and Graham to do this series on Kaupapa Māori. And today's session, we really wanted to look at some of the early work around Kaupapa Māori theory and the development and evolution of Kaupapa Māori theory. That Graham has talked about for many years, as has Linda, and he documented in his PhD thesis as well. So Linda and I are just going to share a few questions with Graham initially, and just to get the ball rolling. But I'll just give both Graham and Linda an opportunity first to introduce themselves. In terms of where I'm from Taranaki and Waikato. My iwi, my tribal affiliations are Tiatiawa, Waikato Tainui, and Ngā Mahanga Tairi, and my hapu are Ngāti Mahanga and Ngāti Rāhiri. So tēnā koutou.
Kia ora, tēnā koe e wetiri mō o kupu hei hangata rawhatu ki te rungarawa. Mō mātou nei. Kōrero hoki Leonie, ngā mihi kia koe. Ko Hingangaroa hau no taitanga hauiti. kei te tai rāwhiti, ko tērā te taha o tōku pāpā, ko tōku māma no ngā tiapa kei Whanganui. Ko oku nei iwi anō, ko Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa. Tino koa hau ki ara mai ki konei, ki te kōrero.
Kia ora everyone. Linda here. I'm from Ngāti Awa, Ngāti Pro, Tūhourangi. It's good to have this opportunity to quiz Graham, because his name is often cited in Kaupapa Māori, but people don't really hear him talk about it that much, actually. It's very hard to kind of find what he has written about being talked about now directly from the mouth. So this is a good opportunity.
Kia ora tātou. So I wanted to really start with my first quiz question, and that was really around the emergence of Kaupapa Māori theory and how that began in the work that you did, Graham, in the 1980s. And maybe if you could just share a little bit about the kind of origins of the principles or the origins of that work and how that came about.
Hi, kia ora. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share where we are up to in this ongoing struggle really around Kaupapa Māori. And I think, like you, Leonie, I think it is important to traverse some of the historical roots of the beginnings in order for people to be able to conduct the shape of what's going on more accurately and more professionally, in my view. Having said that, I do have some critique really of some of the more recent material, which has really been more rhetorical rather than understanding fully what Kaupapa Māori approaches. So it's the theory and the practice has been about. So to start at the beginning, I was involved earlier in my life with Hingangaroa, actually, and being involved with our daughter, who was born in 1982. So it coincided with the development of Hingangaroa. So we were at the dawn, if you like, of the beginning of that movement. And so we were very interested in making sure that she had the opportunity to learn the language, and that was sort of the naive sort of hope at the beginning. But after we had engaged with a number of other people in developing a kōhanga, soon we became very aware that we had a great deal of potential in the kōhanga to learn through the medium of the language, and it wasn't just about the language on its own, but also an opportunity to engage with improving learning for Māori students. So the original development, which is often lost, was about this duality. It was actually about the desire to improve education as well as to capture our language, knowledge and culture. And over time, that has been lost, and it's become what I call sort of captured in a sort of a cultural reductionism of being mainly just about the language now and the culture. And while that has been successful in its own right, to a certain extent, I've always felt that, you know, that we've lost some of its potential by not also accenting the idea that this would have been about learning as well, improving learning, because as everyone knows, Māori still continue, and certainly at that time, in the 1980s, Māori suffered high and disproportionate levels of educational underdevelopment. So I use the term underdevelopment, of course, to connote the idea that this is it's not just about deficit of learners, as it was, you know, mostly suggested by the system, but it was also about the problems of the system being inadequate in dealing with Māori learners. So that was the context that we became involved. It was really around our daughter. The movement itself has a lot written about it, you know, and its beginnings in Pukeatua and various meetings that were held and so on. And it became a people movement. And the key thing about kohanga was that it led very quickly to the necessity to think about schooling more generally. Because when the kids turned 5, as it was with our daughter, people asked the question, well, what happens next? And so along with Tuki Nepe and a whole group of other pioneers, Katarina Mataira and others, who were key players in this development, we're suggesting that we needed to start our own schooling type. And I remember that when we developed the name Kaupapa Mori, I was at that meeting when we developed that term. And I remember saying, because actually the acting Minister of Education was at this meeting, Guy Scott, and we said to him that we're going to put this name on the lips of everybody in 2 years. Well, it only took about 2 months and everyone had grasped hold of that idea of Kaupapa Māori schooling. So, yeah, so along with, there's a lot of people involved in the development of the schooling. It developed as a response to the need for our kohanga kids to go somewhere. Now, one of the great issues that needs to be, I think, explained a little bit more is that at the time we were developing this initiative of Kaupapa Māori schooling, Hone, or John Waititi Kura, as it was known then, was in place, and Ruamata was in place. And those two kura were operating just for their own kohanga. So their kohanga kids could go on to a schooling expression. They weren't public schooling that provided an opportunity for everyone. So we, for example, tried to line up for Waititi with our kids, and they said, no, we can't take you. This is for our kohanga. So the distinction here is that the Kaupapa Māori schooling movement became a movement about changing the New Zealand education system to accommodate a particular type of schooling, and what's more, to pay for it as a schooling option in New Zealand. So it was a political movement, and that's the distinction between these other two schools. So we always acknowledge Ruamata and Waititi as the matua schools, but they came on a bit later. They were interested in the whole idea of the movement and the political change that was necessary. But it was more of a political initiative to change the schools. So that's really just a quick overview of the development. But the Kaupapa Māori very much followed behind the principles of what was being done in Hingangaroa and built it up into an elementary school level. All right, so what happened was that at the same time as this was being developed, I had worked as a teacher in the early schools. So, we developed an early schooling model at the Teachers College. I was a lecturer at the Teachers College at the time, so had access to a lot of resources there, which enabled us to get a start. And then, from that beginning, we then spread out into different community contexts. And again, you can read the history elsewhere of the development of the Waipareta School and various other offshoots of that particular early beginning. So simultaneous to this, while we were doing this, I also had gone back to university and was wanting to finish my doctorate. So all the time I'm doing this teaching, I'm also researching, if you like. It's a practical engagement with the field that I'm interested in. So it took, I think, about 15 years of actual practical research of doing it, what I call getting blisters on your hands research. And it's that practical element that I find is missing from a lot of the commentators who have been involved in this, is that they've felt that they could write, a whole lot of stuff about kaupapa, but actually very few of them had deep experience of actually doing it on the ground and working with communities. So my research work actually was about looking at the how these schools developed, and why the key central question was, okay, why have Māori parents elected to send their kids to an alternative schooling system? And so I was interested in kohanga, and I was interested in Kaupapa Māori parents. And so over time, it interviewed a whole lot of parents, aggregated all of their responses, and came up with six key elements, I think, that Māori parents were looking for out of these schools. So those elements were the tino rangatiratanga principle, right, which was about self-determination, that Māori parents wanted more control over the education of their kids. And so I interpreted that as being, some sort of sense of autonomy in the educational business, because for the most part, the traditional schooling setting was we sent our kids to school and you didn't see them till 3 o'clock. We had very little participation in what was happening inside the school. So, it's little wonder that they were busily being assimilated and so on. And many kids felt uncomfortable in that environment. So the principle of self-determination was one. Second principle, I think, was taonga tuku iho, but Māori parents expressed that they wanted their language, knowledge and culture taught through the schooling system for them. So these are the things that were important, and obviously, are a counter-narrative, if you like, to the colonizing structure of the current schooling of the day. Ako Māori was that Māori parents expressed that they wanted their kids to learn in a setting that reinforced their values and their the cultural practices that were part and parcel of their everyday life. In other words, not going into a strange schooling environment where the culture was entirely different. The fourth one actually was kia piki ake I ngā rauru o te kāinga. And this, to me, was one of the most important elements, certainly, I think, underdeveloped in terms of people's understanding of what these schools could do. And that was usually expressed in things like, I don't want my baby to be a Frisian worker like me, or I don't want my baby just to work in a shop, I want them to go to university. They had these big aspirations for their kids. And a lot of those aspirations were against, if you like, the socio-economic conditions that were prevalent in the communities at the time. And so what I discovered there was that in the schools, the ability to accent our collegiality, our collectivity, our whanaungatanga, our working together was a form of social capital that was able to intervene in some of the worst excesses of this socio-economic deprivation that was abroad in our communities. In other words, our ability to share our resources. And so in a context like today, you know, with the virus and so on, this is exactly, again, we're seeing this come to the fore. The other side of this in the international arena, I know that in the Katrina disaster in the States, one of the complaints afterwards when they reviewed everything was that people had lost their ability to act as a community. That neighbours couldn't speak to neighbours. And so there was a lack of support infrastructure that was part of our social lifestyle. But in our traditional lifestyle, we've always had that. So in these schools, our capacity to leverage that to both as an immediate intervention around the needs of kids in schools, and particularly those who came from environments that were, again, socially and economically deprived, it was a very important factor. Then after that, I think the principle of whanaungatanga was important. And whanaungatanga, or whānau, was the idea that our infrastructure of whānau actually contained all of these cultural elements to enable us to do this. And whakawhanaungatanga and all of that, the responsibilities, our reciprocity, our manaakitanga, those kinds of things, again, were an important element. So today, a lot of people will just focus on the whanaungatanga as being the key thing of Kaupapa Māori, but it's more than that. I think it's both the means and the practice. Whānau is the structure, and whanaungatanga is the practice of that, which is important. And the last, or the last one was sort of the collective philosophy of being able to work together. And so this was important for when our collective vision was adhered to around the philosophy of Kaupapa Māori. So holding up Kaupapa Māori as a collective vision and a philosophy to work together. All right, so those are the 6 key things that came out of it, and I would say this now, after in reflection, that over time, people have added, other scholars and authors have added different principles. And I think that's fair enough. The whole idea and haven't talked about the theorising component yet, but the whole idea of theory is that it has to grow, otherwise it's useless. If it's not being interrogated, if it's not being built up, then it's only has a limited application. So what I did then with these principles was to package them up and call them the theory of transformation. And that really was my thesis. So the title of my thesis was, think Kaupapa Māori as transformative praxis. So the word praxis, which has become very something that sort of everyone is throwing around these days, wasn't used very often in those days. So I have to find some new language. But praxis is the idea that you do it and you continue to remodel and to reconfigure to make it a continuous improvement sort of cycle. So the other part that's important in that title is the transformative word. So the idea that I was trying to pick up on was that the education system that we were being served up needed to change. And in many of our different places where we engage today, there is still need for change because the way in which things are being done are not working and usually less than successful in terms of our own aspirations. So there needs to be some sort of transforming. So over the years, while I was at the university, we had a number of colleagues and students who've expanded the Kaupapa Māori theory base and have written on it. And of course, Linda, Leonie, Taina Pohatu, with his ata, critical perspective. He wrote for social work. Fiona Cram and Margie Hoepa, Peter Sharples, Jenny Lee, Morgan, Chris Tooley, often overlooked, but it performed a very important function in this cycle, in the fact that he went to Cambridge and did his thesis there on Kaupapa Māori philosophy at the University of Cambridge. And, all of these scholars are legitimating and building, if you like, the power of this and doing their own good work and taking this. So Chelsea Grootveld is someone more recently I've worked with who is doing, a lot of this accountability stuff around institutions claiming that they're doing stuff for Kaupapa Māori. She's got a very good framework that holds people to account, and others. So collectively, everyone's been building its legitimacy within the academic domain. So whereas I talked about the historical part in the first instance being really community-based and being about self-development in the community, a second part of the struggle has been in the academy, and it's been the struggle to engage with the academy. So in naming Kaupapa Māori as theory, it was to many people an absolute affront that we would think that Kaupapa Māori was a theory of transformation. And I deliberately did that because I was warned not to do it. That it's but I thought that actually that was one of the big struggles that we needed to undertake: how to crack the academy, how to insert our own ways of knowledge and thinking in a more definitive way inside the academy. As anyone knows, theory is really the raison d'etre of theory and research of the university context. So until we start to penetrate those kinds of domains, then we're still on the outside. We're still, if you like, in those early writings, primitive knowledge, you know, myths and so on. We were very much cast as being nativistic and all of that kind of thing, unscientific. And so that's been part of that struggle as well. And really all those scholars I alluded to have actually been on that course, have been about challenging the academy in all sorts of places. So I will say this, is that our struggle inside the academy is not one struggle. I've said this often, it's many struggles. And so that's because colonization is not coming at us in one form or one place, but in many shapes, many places. So we need many hands and many minds who are taking up this struggle, if you like, inside the academy. So notwithstanding that we have a few wayward writings here and there, for the most part, everyone has been, rolling up their sleeves to do that. And so, it's important, I think, to acknowledge the collectivity of this as we go forward, because there's still a lot of young scholars who are coming through who will fulfill that. All right, so I think some of the gains we've made, or you want me to pause at this point?
No, I've moved to stop now.
Oh.
We're meant to be interviewing you. And you've answered all our questions in one coho. Thank you very much. Oh, we want to ask you some other questions.
Okay,
right.
let Linda give you a question.
Okay, so we'll go right to the end of our list of questions we were going to ask you, because you use two terms quite often and we need you to explain them. You use the term culturalist and the term structuralist.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by those terms, and why do you use them? And can you be like a bit more concise in your answer?
No.
Because we have some other questions.
All right. So culturalist and structuralist are important sort of concepts to, I think, critically unpack. They are situated within the idea that in order to be a Kaupapa Māori practitioner, in my view, you need to have a good critical analysis that goes alongside that. And you need to have, if you like, the critical tools that can unpack the taken for granted system to enable us to assert the things that we want to put in place. So one of there's two generalizations in which some of this stuff fits. So the idea of the culturalist domain is that it's all about what people do. It's all about people's behavior. It's all about culture. And so that can be both a positive and a negative thing. So on the one hand, yes, we want our language, knowledge and culture to survive. So we put great accent on that as being an important area for change. But sometimes if we just put accent on the culturalist stuff of changing people's attitudes, of changing the language, knowledge and culture, on its own, it's not enough. So the structural stuff that we refer to is the bigger hidden societal elements that are often at play simultaneously. Mm-hmm. So it's all very well changing our behaviors, but if the big structures and superstructures, the economy, as we've seen in the United States, which is being manipulated by Donald Trump and others, it can have a tremendous influence on people's lives. And so underneath, inside that structuralist domain, I would put things like hegemony, the way we think, as a structure. I would put policy, I would put economics, and systems, the systemic elements that sit over the top of us. So we need to engage with both fields. That's what I mean by structuralist and culturalist. And early on, I did say that, that split in our early struggle where people focused on the language and knowledge and culture and forgot about the learning stuff. In a sense, we forgot about the structural blockages to learning and all of that, and we concentrated on a culturalist argument. So my perspective on that is that we need to do both.
Okay, hand it over to Leonie. She can ask you a question.
Aye, ka pai, kia ora. I think just because we're, we are running out of time at the moment, I really wanted to get some reflection from you, Graham, on how you apply or think about those principles in relation to the context we're in now in terms of what is happening with COVID-19. So I think if we kind of could bring them into a bit of now. And so if you're thinking about those 6 principles, how might you talk about those and analysing where we're at the moment?
Yeah, I think that a lot of those principles can be seen already in the way in which iwi have just up and started to operate ourselves, that we have the confidence to do things for ourselves, that I think that the battle that was won with kohanga and kura about, because the win really for me wasn't so much about all these wonderful schools and kohangas we developed. The win that occurred in the 1980s was up here in our heads. It was a change of mindset, a mindset to move away from waiting for people to do things for us, to actually getting up and doing them for ourselves. That was the self-development revolution, I believe, that was really significant. So there's that part, in that self-determining, if you like. I think in the, the cultural capital stuff and the social development element has been important because, again, we've seen our ability to mobilise collectively and to share resources, to look after kaumātua and all of that. And gosh, it was really almost, I felt a little bit of guilty because that people turned up for a kaumātua package for me. I didn't know whether to feel, but it was great, and I think those are things that it reinforces our cultural way of doing things. And then there's I think all the way through those elements, we've got confidence now in engaging with them in a way in which I think was prior to kohanga and kura, they were being taken away from us. We were being colonised. When I went to school, we were, line up in a straight line, sit in your own desk. It was very much an individualistic sort of life. You didn't share. You ate your own lunch. It was in your own bag and all of that sort of thing. It was completely different. So I would say that actually all of those elements are very much alive and pertinent in the contemporary context. There are other things we've learned from that struggle which are important, and not least of which I think our ability to critique the context in which we're trying to exist and how we can make space to move forward.
Just picking up on that point on, in terms of the tino ranga tiratanga principle and the self-determination in this time. And we're going to talk in another discussion around our future aspirations for Kaupapa Māori, but I am kind of interested at this point in how you see, as we come out of this time of lockdown, how we may need to step up a little more these principles of tino rangatiratanga, taonga tuku iho, kia piki aki ngā rare o te kāinga, which I think I agree with you is a kind of often misunderstood principle. But what we're seeing now is that if we want to survive this in the future, we're going to have to do things differently, which is actually returning to some of those fundamental principles. So what kind of thoughts have you had around how we may step these up as we move through this period and then out of this period?
Yes, I think we need to find some new vehicles in which we can help educate people, you know, and to again respond to building our capacity and capability at community level. And I know that actually that was one of the things that I felt good about when I was at the Wānanga, because we worked very closely with community. And so we had opportunities to engage with marae in different ways and so on. But I think we need to, to find some vehicles in which this stuff is enabled and supported, notwithstanding that, you know, the crisis itself has been a context in which it's needed to be responded to. And I think, so we've got some work to do, I think, as scholars and academics to write up, you know, how this stuff has been effective and how it has worked, and how our people and our communities have done a fantastic job, and what they are saying to the rest of the country, really. And so that's all part of that struggle. You know, when I talked about Chris going to Cambridge, that was one side of you know, the validity and legitimacy in the academic domain. But you know, we've had lots of practical engagements and enactment that's gone on in different sites and different, you know, we've seen, we've been to the World Congress on Qualitative Inquiry, the World Conference on that. Linda's spoken there, I've spoken there. When I went there was only 2 speakers. They only have 2 keynote speakers for a week-long, big, huge conference, and we were one. So that kind of exposure is fantastic. It's building, if you like, the legitimacy in the international domain. Much of my work has really been, and I'd have to say, probably more renowned in the international domain than at home in terms of some of the application of this stuff. And I think while that's been important, you know, for, you know, one level for legitimacy, at the other end of it is that we need to get, you know, again, continue to think about take up and buy-in, if you like, from our own communities here in New Zealand. Many government departments are taking up Kaupapa Māori frameworks, and again, although I would say the caution there is a lot of it is rhetorical rather than practical, it needs to be kept a careful eye on. But in a sense, it is a legitimating element. But you know, we've had numerous cross-cultural applications of our work here in New Zealand, in, you know, Canada, First Nations, Alaska, Hawaii, Sami, and so on. So it's got this international outlook as well. So I think our work is to build all of that, to build the legitimacy. And so my thing of going overseas was, I don't care about you know, the New Zealand element putting all the gatekeeping in front of me. It's got its validity in the international arena. If you like, that's the lesson of Te Māori, where Te Māori went overseas to the New York Met and became this tremendous, world famous, you know, exhibition of objects of art, and these things which were gathered from the basements of museums and so on as artifacts, went on a plane overseas and virtually overnight became objects of art. And it's so expensive they couldn't fly them on the same plane back to New Zealand. You know, all of that. There are lessons there for us about the arbitrariness of knowledge, that in one context it's this, and in another context it's this, that knowledge is socially constructed. So going forward, I think, in looking at the United States, I think these are some of the lessons that we're going to have to learn, because actually if you look at, and I'll probably speak to this a little bit later on, but the issue of what I call Trumponomics and the recasting of the neoliberal project, I think is important for us, because our response has been to neoliberalism, but Donald Trump's recast it. So again, you know, we have to be alert to these new formations of colonization and how we might respond to them. So, but that's another discussion at a later time. But I have to say I've got to do a bit more thinking. I think it's inadequate just to say that scholars and academics are going to do this stuff, eh? We know that, we've written about this, but the part of it is, how do we get buy-in from communities around new projects that build off the back of this kind of learning.
Ka pai. Linda, e pātai tai?
Well, how much time do we have left? I'm trying to ask a question in case.
No, we can go. We started a little bit later. So
Leonie's got the editor's button.
She can cut it off. Well, I'm kind of winging off now from not so much the questions that we had prepared, but I want to go back to Kaupapa Māori, because I think there's something that's happened with Kaupapa Māori that's another lesson for how we might think about Kaupapa Māori theory and research, in that Kaupapa Māori have not grown. They're major impediments to Kaupapa Māori being able to thrive and multiply. You know, the numbers of kura have been constrained structurally. And in a way, one of the things that's happened is that some kura like that. You know, they kind of have benefited from being a limited pool. So I guess the question is, you know, the constraint on Kaupapa Māori, to what extent does that stymie, stultify, you know, create a kind of fixed, rigid idea about Kaupapa Māori? I mean, I just think if we go back to the roots of what we dreamed about in developing kura and where we're at with kura, it's got some lessons in for maybe how we have developed and dreamed about Kaupapa Māori across other contexts. You know, it goes back to your point about growth and development. It's an observation, really.
Yeah,
What do you think?
Yes, no, I think that that we still have work to do in our own communities, and I think one of my greatest disappointments is that the critical perspective has been overtaken by the culturalist priority of language, knowledge and culture. And we haven't learned the critical politics that go alongside that. Because unless you've got the critical politics that can defend the spaces that we win, they're just going to be overtaken again. We become domesticated and our ability to change is stifled by the system. And I think we're seeing a lot of that where, you know, you could say that some of the schools have become this system. They've been reinterred, if you like, reburied in the traditional colonial system of schooling. And so there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of how we really position that. But the other thing I would say is that I've always said that the Kaupapa Māori struggle and Kaupapa Māori schools and kohanga are a strategy. They are not the strategy. And by that I mean we need to also think, continue to think of other ways of doing this.
Yeah.
That we can't just invest all of our answers in being, it's all about kohanga, it's all about kura, but going forward, what are the other strategies? And many ways being drawn into the wānanga setting was partly about that. What's the potential for developing change in the application of these ideas in a different setting? But there's we have other opportunities, I think, that are coming out of iwi settlement processes, and iwi taking more executive control, if you like, of some of the educational oversight of their iwi that hold potential, because I know a lot of the people that have been put in charge actually have good backgrounds in this stuff. So, they're thinkers. So there's, I think we're still searching for other ways of doing this, and we shouldn't put all of our eggs in the one basket. But again, I think we need to be clear about the domains in which we're working. So, yep, there's the community and working with the community, and we all know we've got bruises when you get it wrong, working with our communities, rightly so. And then there's the academy, which is only a few can get in there to do that fight. And so those of us that are in there, I think are punching well above our weight in terms of the gains that have been made in the education side of the university in particular. And to wit the number of doctoral students that are now coming through, although I have to say, if we're winning 70% of them in terms of having a really good critical education, then we're doing really well. But we know we're not winning 100% and don't expect to. But it's still a great site to be struggling in. I think it will make a difference in the end, because each of those people become influential leaders in their own domain. So that's that whole business of multiple sites of engagement.
Well, look at what's happening in health. Our Māori health experts, researchers, practitioners, their capacity is on show right now with the coronavirus, because their expertise is fantastic. So I think building capacities across multiple sites starts to give us a fighting chance in terms of arguing for equity at the very least, let alone tino rangatiratanga.
Yeah, no, I have great faith in some of our students that are coming through. And some of the work I've read, different theses that have been sent through and whatnot are fantastic. Hell, I wish I could have written like that when I was doing mine. But again, that's that incremental development of our, someone had to break the ground, and we probably, went early on. And but it's great to see that people are taking advantage of that, and the building blocks have been solid enough to allow them to make some really interesting strategies and work.
Fine, kia ora. That's probably a good place for us to leave this session on that notion of how solid the building blocks have been. I think in terms of Kaupapa Māori generally, Māori educational initiatives, Kaupapa Māori theory and methodology. And that really was our kaupapa today, really, was to kind of talk about some foundational things and to remember those and to kind of reiterate those as we move forward. Tēnei te mihi atu kia koe, Graham. Not only for this session, but for all of the mahi that you've done with others as a part of a collective, but definitely as a forefront, writer and theorizer and thinker and scholar in terms of Kaupapa Māori with the theory attached in particular. And we know that was really important to put theory to the term and to create a way of opening theoretical spaces where we could engage across, initially within education, but it wasn't very long before that actually expanded out into all disciplinary areas. I want to agree with Linda around what Māori health providers, practitioners, specialists are doing in this time as well. And thinking back to some of the early Māori health practitioners that talked about Kaupapa Māori and the work that they were doing and have led it in that sector as well. So with that, we'll sign off for this session soon with Wetini doing our closing karakia. And just really to acknowledge you today, Graham, and your mahi, and Linda again. And the next session we do will be Linda giving her reflections on the development of Kaupapa Māori as methodology. And that'll give some more kind of insights into that foundational work. So before we hand to Wetini, Graham, if there's anything you'd like to say in closing, and then Wetini will do the closing karakia.
Yeah, no, just to say that, I'm not a very good speaker when I'm talking to a machine, just feel free to edit as you need to. Take out all the R's and ums and whatnot. Kia ora. Thank you.
Ka pai. Wetini, kia koe.
Ka tira kia ora tātai. O tira tēnei te mihi atu kia koe te pāpā, tai atu kia kōrua, ngā mahareikura, ko koutou hoki ngā tohunga me ngā ahorangi o Kaupapa Māori rangahau. O tira tēnei rā te mihi atu kia kōtou. Mai ia mātou no ngā waia te tui, tai atu kia tūtama wahine o Taranaki. So just a very big thank you for being part of our kōrero session today. There you go, whānau. There you have it. That was our first discussion and kōrero panel, and I know you'll be absolutely looking forward to the rest of the series. Gosh, to be a fly.
Graham's been locked up for 2 weeks.
I was going to say, to be a fly on the wall in the Smith house. But anyway, I runga i tērā, me whakakapi hoki tātou i tā tātou nei hui, i tā tātou nei kōrero i tēnei ata. Kia tata mai rā koe i hua kia mātou i tēnei rā, hei arahi koe i a mātou i te oranga tonutanga. Hei āwhina heitia ki a mātou i roto i ngā tini pūtanga kētanga i ngā tini pāheketanga o tēnei ao krōria ki tō ingoa tapu. Āmene. Ara noho ra pai kōtou, kia pai te noho haumaru hoki. Kia ora rā tātou.
Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Wetini.
Tēnā koe. Hei kona.